One.
Harav YCD, welcome back to Yerushalmi Terumot. We are holding on Daf Yud Tes Amud Aleph, okay, which in the old Vilna pages is roughly Daf Yud. We are discussing the Brisa brought the words of the Chachamim who argue on Rav Lai. Now the Chachamim said to Rav Lai, they said, "Ein lecha karei lach al yain v'shemen bavad." Remember, we're talking about things. Remember, you're taking truma from tahor things for tamei, and that you can take truma with tahor for tamei with liquids, but that was maybe only with wine and oil, but not wet fruit or anything like that, or pickled olives. So that's where we're up to. So Amar Lai ein lecha karei lach al yain v'shemen bavad. Hey chabida. Now, how is it you're going to separate truma tahor for wine or oil, which is tamei? And remember, truma, you have to take min and mukuf. They have to be near each other, right? Without being tamei, the truma, how are you going to do it? If a tiny bit touches, the liquid touches the other liquid, it's going to be tamei. So what's going on? So the truth is, there's no real solution to separate truma tahora for wine or oil min and mukuf. You can't do it. When the Chachamim said Rebbe Eliezer allows you to do it with wine or oil, that's in cases which are brought in the following brisa. So we see like this. So imagine in the olive press you had kora achas lishnei boiros. So you had one big beam which is pounding all the olives, and the oil goes down, and there are two different vats where the oil goes into. Right? So you're allowed to take truma from the oil which is in one vat for the oil which is in the other vat. And even if the oil in one of the vats becomes tamei, you can take truma from the tahor oil, which is in one vat, for the tamei oil, which is in the other vat. And remember, they're not necessarily touching each other now, because they're in two separate vats, right? And that's considered min hamukaf, although they're not actually touching each other, but in the same press, these two vats, that's considered next to each other. And you can do the same with wine. Now also, if you have, now this is what I was going to ask in a second, but if you have in the press shnei koros, two beams which are pressing the olives, but the oil goes down into the boir echad, into one vat, all the oil goes into one place, you're still allowed to separate truma from the oil which is pressed through one of the beams for the oil which is pressed into by the other beam. Now, even though one oil is tahor, one oil is tamei. Now, the one is going to ask on this now. So, Nicha, I understand if you have one beam and two vats. That I get. I understand the oil in one vat is tamei, and the oil in the other vat is tahor. And the Brisa tells us you can take truma from the tahor for the tamei. Ella, but he said in the second case you told me, shnei koros lebayir echad, two beams, but everything's going into one vat. I don't understand. Like, how can the Brisa tell me you can take truma from tahor for tamei? Mitar shenitzma miksasa nitzma kulam. When some of it becomes tamei, the whole thing becomes tamei. So how can some of the oil be tamei, be tahor, if it's in the vat together with the tamei oil? How's that going to work? So Rebbe Eliezer, Tifta, we can explain that we don't mean a case where really it goes into one vat. We don't mean that. We're talking about this. So in the beginning, when he squeezed the olives, he had the intention that all the oil will be together in one vat. But the nimlach, is there a problem with this? The nimlach, he changed his mind. That now he's changed his mind that the oil should go into two vats, and the oil was tamei in one of the vats. So he changed his mind and made it into two. So the Brisa tells me, from the beginning, he had the intention to join all the oil in one vat. Now in the end, he changed his mind and divided it into two. Now although it's been squeezed through two beams, it's considered one, and you're allowed to separate the oil in one vat for the oil in the second vat. And even if one of the oils becomes tamei, you can separate truma from the second oil, which is in the second vat. Okay, the tahor oil in the second vat. So although you changed your mind in the process, and in the beginning you were going to put it all in one, and then you've made it into two, so the oil goes into two vats, you're still allowed to separate tahor from tamei. Okay. Right, according to the Chachamim who argue on Rav Eliezer, only where the tamei and the tahor are in two separate vats, you can be Torah one for the other without them touching. And Rebbe Lezer allowed you to be Torah for Tomei. But if they're pickled olives where the Torah actually touches the Tomei, even Rebbe Lezer agrees that the Chacham put a decree not to take Truma Torah for Tomei, because we're always worried that you will take Truma. I mean, you might not want them to be near each other and then they'll be far away, and then that's also a problem. Okay? According to the Tanakh Mishnah, in all cases the Chachamim forbade you to take Truma Torah for Tomei, even if it's in two separate vats, and even though there's no worry, Shalom and Amulka, if you don't need to join the vats together, they made no chiluk, and they said always it's forbidden to separate Truma Torah for Tomei. Okay? We said that with Trumas Maaseh, we said you were allowed to separate when they weren't near each other. Remember that? But Truma itself, they have to be near each other. Okay. Now, the brisa we mentioned tells us these halachas apply with wine. So if all the grapes are pressed in, let's say, go into one vat, and the wine goes down into one gus, actually. The grapes are pressed in one press, but the wine runs into two different vats. Again, you can take truma from the wine which is in one pit for the wine which is in the second one, even if one is tahor, one is tameh. And also if they're pressed in two presses, but you had the intention to put all the things together into one vat, and then you change your mind, and you put it into two, you can take truma one for the other, even tahor for tameh. This thing that you're saying that you can separate truma from tahor wine for tameh wine, that's only b'shenitma mishashila or mishakipa. Now this, if the wine became tameh after you removed all the skins of the grapes and the pips of the grapes, now in this situation, kvar niru l'tamad v'tara, it's reached a stage. This wine has reached a stage that you could take truma. It's considered gemar malach of wine, right? You've taken all the pips out and everything. So now it's reached a stage where it can have chiyuv maasros if it's still tahor. It's got a din, you should separate truma from the tahor. The chachamim were lenient and allowed you to separate tahor, even though now it's become tameh. You can separate from tahor produce for this, because this was fitting to have a state of maaseh in a state of purity, and a state of truma in a state of purity. Aval im nitma, if however the wine in its production stage got tameh much earlier on, before you removed all the pips and so on and the skins, so it's not really finished, and it's not yet got a chiyuv maasros while it's in a state of purity. So there's no din to be mafresh on its truma from tahor. Then lovada, then the halacha was not said, and even Rebbe Lezer agrees that we will not allow you to take truma from tahor wine for the tameh wine in this situation. You follow? Since it never reached a stage of production where it was fitting to have an obligation of maaseh in a state of purity, then we don't allow you to separate tahor from tameh. And now that it's become tameh, but I'm afraid we don't allow you to separate tahor from tameh. Okay. So it would never had a chiyuv, trumas and maasros from the Torah in a state of purity. So it did not have a din to separate truma min tahor. So the chachamim were not lenient in their din, and even according to Rebbe Lezer, they did not allow you to separate truma from the wine which is tahor. Okay, now we bring a dinim from the Amoraim about the argument between Rebbe Lezer and Tanna Kamma in our Mishnah. Reb Tevi, Reb Yosef, Reb Yanai. Halacha to Rebbe Lezer. The halacha is like Rebbe Lezer, that you're allowed to separate truma, tahor for tameh. Reb Yitzchak bar Nachman, Shem Reb Oshia, halacha to Rebbe Lezer. The halacha is like Rebbe Lezer in our Mishnah. Again, you can separate truma from that which is tahor for that which is tameh. The passage in Rebbe Lezer in our Mishnah who allows you to separate truma from tahor from tameh when it comes to liquids. Rav Huna, Rav Hananya, he said, "Ein halacha Rebbe Lezer." He said, "No, halacha is not like that." Rav Yosef, Rav Yehuda, B'Shem Shmuel, "Ein halacha Rebbe Lezer." He said, "Halacha is not like Rebbe Lezer." Asa Uvda Kum Rabbi. The story came to Rabbi, but lo Heidi, he was not prepared to allow it like Rebbe Lezer. Amar, because he said, "Train kol kabel traininun." There's two Amoraim who forbid it and two who permit it. I can't decide. I can't be machriya. I can't weigh in with a view to saying who the halacha is like when two say this and two say that. So he was not prepared to give a view with arrogance or anything. Rav Tevi and Yisrael Nachman agreed to allow it like Rebbe Lezer. Rav Huna and Rav Yossi passing the halacha is not like Rebbe Lezer, so he just didn't want to paskin. Amrele, they said, but Rav Yitzchak bar Nachman hayre, but he allowed it like Rebbe Lezer halacha l'maaseh with the question that came before him. Afilu came, and even though they told this to Rabbi, Lo Hari, he was not prepared to say a halacha to allow it like the view of Rabbi Elazar. Okay, we've learned in our Mishnah, Ein Tamin min Tamei ala Tahor. You cannot take truma for that which is tamei for that which is tahor, and if you did by mistake, the truma is valid. Taman Tanina. Right, we're now going to bring a Mishnah in Tul Yom. And then we're going to bring a Mishnah in Tul Yom, and we're going to use it to ask on our Mishnah. Let's see what's happening here. Taman Tanina. We've learned in Tul Yom. Now imagine you are separating wine from your vat, right? You're separating wine. Why are you separating wine? To be truma. The wine's in your vat. You're drawing out some wine to be truma. You're filling up a barrel with wine. Now, what you don't want is once you separate this wine, while it's above the vat, it becomes tamei and has a leak. And what's going to happen? It's all going to go back into the vat. And all this tamei wine is going to go back into the vat. Okay. You don't want that. So you say, look, I'm separating this wine. I want it to work properly. I don't want to have trouble. And if it has trouble, then I don't want it to be truma. This is where this is coming in. It's a sort of condition which the Chachamim allowed a person to have not to ruin the whole vat. Okay? So let's see this now. So Hatorah Mesabo, so he's separating truma from the wine in the pit, in the vat. And he fills up his barrel of wine. And he makes a condition. And the Omai says, I raise a truma. Well, yeah, I want this to be truma, providing Amanas Shetala B'Shalayim. Providing everything goes peacefully, then I'm happy for it to be truma. Now, he didn't say exactly what was his intention here. What were the possible problems that could have happened? What problems could there be?
The whole thing becomes
it could become tamei. What sort of tamei are we talking about? That's the first question. Are we talking about sheretz? Are we talking about anything else? Tul yom? What sort of tamei are we talking about? He doesn't explain what he's referring to. Now, he says it could be the wine that's separated will go back into the vat, and all the wine now is a mixture with truma and chulin. That could be one problem. So maybe he wants to make a tanai that he's calling it truma, that if it falls back, then it was never truma, and then it would just be tebel again. It could be the wine you're separating will be tamei, and you're causing a loss to the kohenim, because truma, which is tamei, a kohen is not allowed to eat it. And the kohen's allowed to use it just for fuel or whatever. So to prevent this, he wants to make a tanai, when he's calling it truma, that if it becomes tamei, then I don't want the truma to be valid. And then if the wine is tamei in the chavis, then the whole wine will be tebel, and it'll start the process again. So what about, he's separating truma from the wine from the vat. He makes a general tanai. I don't want the truma to be valid if there's trouble. But he doesn't say what trouble he's referring to. So what do we say he means? So, Amanas Shetala B'Shalom. So he says, he doesn't say what he's talking about. He means, Shalom min ha-shever. He doesn't want the barrel to break and pour the wine back into the vat. And shalom min ha-shvicha. And we don't want the wine to spill into the vat. Again, these problems, you're worried you're taking truma out of the vat. So that's what he means. He doesn't want the barrel to break, which will cause the wine to fall in, and he doesn't want the wine to start spilling back in. Avaloi, he did not have the intention with his condition, min hatuma. He was not thinking about the wine becoming tamei. He's not referring to that. So if the wine is tamei before it's coming out of the pit, out of the vat, it's his truma. It will end up being truma, which is tamei. So he's saying what? Shalom, I don't want the barrel to pour back in, but he's not saying whether it's tamei or not. And shalom from the pouring, I don't want the wine to spill back in because you're worried about that. But he's not referring to tumah. That's the first opinion says. He's not thinking about tumah here. But Rosh Shimon argues with this. Rosh Shimon says no. He's not only he's worried about the barrel breaking or pouring back in, but af mina tumah. He's also referring to if it becomes tamei before he brings it out of the vat, the truma shouldn't be chal. So even if the wine is tamei before it comes out, he says I don't want it to be truma at all if it becomes tamei. Okay. Now, what tumah are we talking about? He says, "B'tumas tzvul Yerushalmi Masechet." Rabbi Yeshimon in this Mishnah, where it includes a problem of tumah, he's talking about tumah of a tzvul yom. Someone who's become tamei through an avatama or a sheret, he's a rishon l'tumah. A person who's a rishon can defile food and drink until he goes in the mikveh. As long as he's tamei, he's not allowed to eat maser sheni, truma, or kodshim. Once he goes in the mikveh, he's tahar as far as chulin, and for eating maser sheni, there's a bit of tumah on him. He's a sheni l'tumah. He would defile truma and kodshim. It's called tzvul yom until sunset. And Rabbi Yosef Chanina explains, Rav Shimon in our Mishnah, who included the problem of tumah, this was talking about a tumah of a tzvul yom. If the wine in the barrel became tamei before it came out of the vat with a tumah of a tzvul yom, so a person tzvul yom touching it, that's not truma. Because he included the case that if that happens, I don't want the truma retroactively to be valid. Okay? So Amar Yosef Hanina, but tumah tzvul yom masnisa, that we're talking about tumah that could happen through a tzvul yom causing the tumah. He agrees it doesn't cause. It's not other tumas. We're not thinking a dead body is going to suddenly be brought here, right? He's not thinking of that. He's thinking of someone who's partially tamei who might end up touching this wine. Ravila said, the main worry of tumah is only because of tzvul yom. Why? Why tzvul yom? Because tzvul yom etzuin ben agitos. It makes sense. Which of Shimon, you're thinking about tamei of a tzvul yom because it's common. You find these people around. You're not including other tumah of other tumas. You don't find them in the olive press. You don't find dead insects in the olive press, right? You'll find a person who's become tameh and he needs to wait for sunset.
Why would you not find
You'll find these people around.
Why would you find insects in the olive press?
You won't find insects because they've got special sealing and they made sure no insects go on the olive press. I don't know. You see, you don't get sherets, dead sherets. You don't get. Now, okay, so that's what he wants to say. So that what? The problem is the people who are tzvul yom, you'll find them, right? Maybe they need wine for various things, whatever it is. But we're not including other tumas which you don't find. Now, why is it only tzvul yom? Rav Yossi said, people are tamei tzvul yom. Do you know why you find them in the presses? That's right. He gives the answer. She'ein litval yom maga eitzel tevel. He says a tzvul yom does not metame like ordinary chulin by touching it. He doesn't defile tevel, which is chulin. He doesn't defile that by touching it. It's only truma, right? It's only truma if he touches it. So therefore, he can enter in the press without worry that he'll be metame the wine, which is tevel. The actual tevel doesn't matter if it's tzvul yom touches it. But other people who are metame tevel through touching will not go into the press because they're worried they'll defile the wine. The other people are not going to go there. Right, other tumah person is not going to go in the olive press. So Rabbi Yosef Chanina explains that words of Shimon where he included tumah was as far as tzvul yom is concerned, which is a sort of common occurrence. You'll find these people in the olive press, and his intention to make a condition that if the wine becomes tamei, that the wine that's become truma through tzvul yom before it gets out of the way of the vat, and then it comes out the mafreya that this truma was never valid. Okay. So that's the thing. So he wants to include that if the tzvul yom touches it, then this truma was never truma, and it'll start the process again. Now, the Tanna Kama and Rosh Shimon argue how to explain the condition where he separates truma from the wine, from the vat. He makes a general t'nai. He doesn't explain his t'nai. Now, everyone agrees if you don't make a t'nai, and if anything happens, the truma is valid truma, and if it's trouble, right? If he doesn't make a condition, then I'm afraid that's proper truma, right? The Mishnah brings Rabbi Yossi, who holds even if he didn't make a t'nai, but if the thing broke and the wine got spilt, the truma is still not truma. Why? It's a t'nai based in. There's a t'nai based in, the condition of the based in, that if anything happens, then mafreya, the truma is not valid. And the Gemara brings a brisa which limits the words of Rabbi Yossi. So he wants to say, look, it's all very well a t'nai in tumah, whatever it is, but if the thing breaks, then t'nai based in the truma is not valid. Tani, we've learned in a brisa. Rav Yudin said, when do we say even if you make no condition, the Chachamim instituted you have a condition in place that if the wine spills, the truma is not truma, but truma gedola, when you're separating proper, normal truma, you have to be there, you have to be close to where you're separating it, right? And it's near the bits, which is you're separating it, since there's no other way to separate truma from the wine in the vat. But that's all you can do. You can fill up a barrel of wine when the thing is hanging above the vat and give it a name of truma. So the Chachamim said, we have a condition we will put in place that if anything happens and the wine spills into the vat, it turns out the truma was not chal. Since you have to be there and we don't want trouble, we will put a condition in place that the truma is not effective if any trouble happens. That's with normal truma. Avol with trumas maser, when you're separating trumas maser where there's no obligation to be nearby, since you have the opportunity to separate it from wine nowhere near to the vat, you can choose wine who knows where, then afilu shar kol hadvarim, even all the other troubles, breaking, spilling, shalom heim. It's as if the thing has not been broken, the wine's not been spilled, the truma is a valid truma. I'm afraid whatever happens, the truma is valid. In this situation, since you had the ability to separate trumas maser from the wine in a way that there'll be no chashash whether there'll be a takala and the wine will spill into the bar, and you didn't do it. You instinctively decided, I'm going to do it this way. You did not listen, Rabbi Isai. Therefore, the Chachamim never put in their condition, they never put in their tanai, that if anything goes wrong, the truma is not chal. The Brisa now brings a situation where the Chachamim or Masakin, there's a tanai, even with trumas maser. So there is a case where there is a tanai, even with trumas maser. Haya Torem, if you're taking truma from the wine in the vat, truma or trumas maser ba'achas, ka'achas, you're doing two together, truma and trumas maser. Rabbi said, for truma, you have to be there. So while you're doing truma, you're doing trumas maser as well. But you have to be there because you're doing truma. Then they put their condition in place, and if the barrel breaks or the wine spills, Eino Shalom. Then it's as if you made a condition that if anything happens, the truma is not chal l'mafreya, right? Even though you never actually clearly said the condition, but the Chachamim put the condition in place. Now, why in this situation there's a tanai, even for trumas maser? Yehuda Rebbe Omer, he says, if we're going to say in this condition, there's a condition here only for truma, and not trumas maser. Rabbi, think of this poor guy. He's trying to separate truma and trumas maser. Truma, he has to be here. Okay, trumas maser he could do elsewhere. Fair enough. So now he's here, and then there's trouble. So we say for truma, we help him out. We say that truma is not valid. What are we going to say for the trumas maser? If we just say the trumas maser is valid, then what's happened? Then he's separated trumas maser before truma. And that's wrong. You're not allowed to do that. He's done a sin. We've created a sin for him. If we don't cancel the trumas maser, he's ended up separating trumas maser before truma. And we don't want to give him that sin. So Yehuda Rebbe Omer, he says, if you're going to tell me there's a tanai only for truma, not trumas maser, then it comes out, if the wine spilled, then it comes out the truma was never valid, and you'll have to separate truma again. And the trumas maser is valid, and then it turns out he separated trumas maser before separating proper truma, and this person had no intention to do any sins, to go against the Torah, lahagdim trumas maser to truma gedola, to put trumas maser before truma gedola. That was never his intention. Therefore, the Chachamim instituted, in this condition, there's a condition here that if anything happens to the wine, it comes out that it was never truma, and it was never trumas maser either. Breathing space, Rabbi Isai. Good, we carry on. Now we've learnt this explanation you give me, we're going to ask on it. Because we learnt in our Mishnah, Ein tabin min atame ala tahar. Don't take truma of that which is tame for that which is tahar. If you did, b'shoigeg is valid. He says, wait a minute. Agaz machal, think of it. Shataram, he took truma from tame for tahar by mistake. And then afterwards, he found out he made a mistake. Amar, then loyalsa adate lava divrei Torah. According to Rebbe, we should say the truma is not valid. Right? He took truma tame for tahar, and b'shoigeg is valid, but it's a mistake, really. So we should say it shouldn't be valid. Let's take away his avera. He made him didn't avera. Let's take it away. Even though he never said it, that's probably his intention. As Rabbi explained, with separating Truma Gedola and Trumas Maaseh, you don't want to separate Trumas Maaseh before Truma Gedola. You don't want to separate Tameh for Tar. So if you did, let's say it's not valid. Why does the Mishnah say it is valid for Shogeg? So Rabbi Baba Mama, he says, if you're going to tell me, wait a minute, if you're going to tell me it's not valid, then what have you got here? You've got Tevel here. If you're going to tell me B'Shogeg is not valid, you're removing the little sin of separating Tameh for Tar. You're removing that little sin. And instead, you're giving him the much bigger sin of not separating Truma at all. You're going to say it's Tevel. And he won't realize it. So you make it worse. You're giving him this worse sin of eating Tevel. He thinks it's valid. And he'll start eating all the Tar fruit that he's now separated for it. And he doesn't know, Tameh and Tar, and maybe it's not valid, and it's all Tevel. And Tevel, Bavod Misa. Tevel is death in the hands of heaven, right? It's very severe. Whereas Truma Tameh for Tar is not so severe. Although we tell him the Truma is valid, could be there's another Issur, the Cohen will eat Truma which is Tameh, he thinks it's Truma which is Tar. Nevertheless, this Issur is not as bad as eating Tevel. Because Tar Sha'achal as a Tameh Ba'aseh, a Tar person who eats Truma which is Tameh, okay, it's an Aseh. But it's not as bad as eating Tevel, right? It's piece of Yerushalmi, death in the hands of heaven for eating Tevel. So it makes sense. When he takes Truma, Tameh for Tar, B'Shogeg, it should be Truma. We don't say it's Batel. We don't want him to stumble with severe issur of eating Tevel, right? But when someone is separating Truma and Trumas Maaseh from the wine in one go, his intention is, look, if it spills, I don't want the Truma and Trumas Maaseh here at all. And through that, it will work out he's not been over on the issur of separating Trumas Maaseh before Truma Gedola, and there's no chashash he'll end up eating Tevel B'Shogeg. Okay, now, we learned in our Mishnah, one who takes Truma from Tameh for Tar, B'Shogeg, is valid. But Mazid is not valid. We bring another opinion. Tani, we learned in a Brayso B'Shem Rabbi Yossi, in Torah min Tameh ala Tar, if you separated Truma from Tameh for Tar, Bein B'Shogeg, Bein B'Mazid, this opinion holds, if you did it even intentionally, Masha Asa Asa, it is effective. And your fruit is now sorted. So Rabbi Yossi argues on the Tana of our Mishnah who holds B'Mazid it doesn't work, he holds it does work. Rabbi Yehuda, okay, next piece. Rabbi Yehuda said, if you knew that the fruit you separated in the beginning was Tameh, and then you forgot, and then you separated Truma, even though it's Shogeg, when you actually did the separation, it's no good, because it's close to Mazid. You should have been careful not to forget. So if you knew once, it's no good because you shouldn't have forgotten. Now, Rabbi Yehuda is Machmir, so he says, if you knew that it was Tameh once, and then you separated it, and then it's not Shogeg, it's Mazid. Rabbi Hinchas Bai Kumar Rabbi Yasser, he asked, Ad Kadun, we know Rabbi Yehuda is strict and treats Shogeg like Mazid, where you knew from the beginning it was Tameh, and you forgot, and you separated Truma, because Savul Bahen Shein Zahirin. In this situation, you should have been careful, you shouldn't have forgotten. Rabbi Yehuda therefore treats you like Mazid. But what about someone, Hayadea Shein Tamein? What about, he knew they were Tameh, but Vasava Shemutzah Nitramin Tameh Alatar. He thought it was permitted to do what he did. You understand? Ayman Mutter is called in the Poskin, where he thought it was permitted. Now what do you say? He knew they told me, but he thought it was permitted. You have this idea. Ayman Mutter is considered Shogeg. So here, he knew, but he didn't know the din. Is Rabbi Yehuda strict to treat him as mazin and say, I'm afraid the fruit is not salted? Or do we say, since he never forgot anything, so it's like Shogeg and the fruit is Masukan? Amalei Rabbi Yasser said, Yos, Rebbe, it's good that Rebbe has a question about this, because Husama Rabbi Yehuda, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who makes a chiluk between Shogeg and mazin, and holds mazin is no good. So the question is, Ayman Mutter, this thing where you think is permitted, is that Shogeg, and your fruit is sorted, or maybe it's mazin and your fruit is not? But however, Rabbi Yossi, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi who makes no chiluk, he holds even mazid, it's valid, and your peres on Masukah. And according to him, Whether you say Omer Mutza is like Shogeg, or whether you say it's like Mazid, the din is the same. When you separate Truma Mazid from Tameh for Tar, the Truma is valid, and B'di Eved you have separated the right Trumas. Okay. Amat Bil Kelim B'Shabbos, one who tables vessels which are Tameh on Shabbos in a mikveh to purify them. If you do it b'shogeg, you can use the vessel that day. If you do it intentionally, you shouldn't use it till Motzi Shabbos. Masnisa. Now we're saying we're learning you can't table vessels on Shabbos. Tamei vessels. Masnisa b'kelim gedolim. Mishnah's talking about big vessels, where it's not a way to use them for pouring water. So you can't table them on Shabbos. It looks like you're doing it in order to purify them. Ava, which of course in Bavli is all connected with Makeh B'Patish, right? Drabanan, Makeh B'Patish, because you're making it usable. Ava b'kelim ketanin, small vessels, but you do pour water with them. Marim aleinu matzbilan, you can cheat, put them in the mikveh as if you want to draw water with it, and at the same process you're tabling them and purifying them. Since it's the way to pour water, it looks like you're putting it in the mikveh for that reason. It's not noticeable that you're doing it for purification. Therefore, the Chachamim do not forbid you to do it on Shabbos. But Tani Rav Moshe led a brisa. Maleu Adam Kli Tameh. You can fill up a Tameh vessel min habar from the pit, or marim alav v'matbilai, and you can cheat, put it in the mikveh as if you want to fill up water, and through that process you are tabling it. So it's like what we said before, that you can table little vessels on Shabbos. It looks like you're drawing water with it. It doesn't appear that you're being Messiah. But Tadi, we learned in the Brisa, Nafal Dadia, if like your big bucket, which you don't draw water with it. If that falls in. Or Nafal Kidia, your other big vessels, which you don't draw water with them. Into the water. Marim Alem Matzbilan. This price is even big things. You can put them there to fill up from water from all sides, and that will also be a purification. So since you didn't do it, only they fell. This is the case where they fell, rather. You didn't put them in, but they fell. Once they've fallen in, then it doesn't look like you're doing it to purify it, so the Chachamim did not forbid you on Shabbos. So if it fell in, you can take it out and you can use it. Okay? Now we're bringing up Machlekas about the Heter to be Tovel Kalim Shabbos with this cheating method. Train Amorim, we have two Amorim. Kadam on one said the Heter to Tovel Kalim, which are Tameh, through this cheat is Afila Kalim Shanitzbu Ba'ava Tumah. Kalim Tameh from the Torah, and definitely rabbinical Tumah, Vlada Tumah, which is Rabbanon. Charina, the other Amora Amar, he said the Heter to Tovel Kalim Tameh on Shabbos is only the Kalim Shanitzbu Ba'vlada Tumah, the only rabbinical Tumah. But Kalim which are Ava Tumah, you can't Tovel them on Shabbos at all. Okay, so there's one cloak, is it Tameh from the Torah or even rabbinical? Massive. So one asked the question, Manda Amar, the one who said the Heter was only Bivlada Tumah, to the rabbinical level, he asked against the Manda Amar Ba'ava Tumah, to the other one. He says, Afilu, if it's an Ava Tumah Keli, Afilu B'chol, even if it's tabled on a weekday, Ton Harav Shemesh, you need to wait till sunset, till it's completely tar. And therefore, if it's tabled on Shabbos, it's not tar completely till nightfall. And therefore the tefillah doesn't really affect it now, so you're only preparing it for use later on. So how can the Chachamim allow you to table it on Shabbos to prepare it Shabbos for the weekday? Because you can't, if it's an avatar, you can't really use it now. Anyway, you've got to wait till nightfall. So he answered back the Amora. He says the kelim which were tamei ba'avatuma is beroid said ishtamish behen cholin b'tara. You want to use it for cholin in a state of purity, and as far as that is concerned, you don't need to wait for nightfall. Right, they're tar straight away. As soon as they've been in the mikveh, you can use it for chulin in a state of purity. And since the tefillah helps to use them straight away on Shabbos, therefore you're allowed to table them on Shabbos. Okay. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Zeira, B'Shem Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi, is an Isha Pekachas, a clever woman who wants to pour water on the floor of her house on Shabbos to stop the dust rising. Medicha Koiskan, she can wash a cup here in one place, Uka'arakan, and another plate in another place in the house. You wash a bit here, bit there, bit there, bit there. But Tamachoi can, and your big pot over there, in another place. And meanwhile, she's pouring water all over the floor. Benin says, Marabet says base. And that way, she's cleaning her house so that the dust will not rise. But on Shabbos in a permitted way, and through this cheat that she's washing all her vessels. Now the Bavli brings According to the Chachamim, you can't just pour water on the floor to stop the dust. It's like a shvus, drabanan. They're worried they'll be full of holes over there in the floor, and you're told that by now you'll fill in the holes in the floor, right? And they're based on three ideas. They hold it's not psik reisha, that the holes will be filled through rivers. They hold davar she'eino miskaven is also, and even according to Yehuda, davar she'eino miskaven is also ben atera, but v'as Shabbos it's a shvus drabanan. It's not meleches machshavos. Nevertheless, it's not psik reisha, and they hold like Yehuda. It's also shum shvus. So Bavli brings various restrictions with this, but the Yerushalmi here seems to allow it. The Bavli also refers to an isha chachama, a clever woman. He says the wife of a Talmud Chacham or the daughter of a scholar who heard this eitzah from her husband or from her father. The Bavli says we paskin like Rav Shimon that davar she'eino miskaven is permitted if it's not your intention, right? If you're allowed to wash the house on Shabbos, even the chatzchila, your kavanah is not to fill in the holes in the earth, whatever it is. Okay, I think we will stop here, Rabbi Sai. And tomorrow.